My name is David Brown. I'm an ophthalmologist. I practice in the United States in St. Joseph, Michigan at Great Lakes Eye Care. I've had about 26 years of doing manual sutureless incision cataract surgery or manual sutureless large incision cataract surgery, what I call SLICS. I'm going to walk you through one of the cases and the technique that I do now that I find best for my hands. This is a total cataract. My first step will be to make side port incisions. That's a 1.2 millimeter blade, specifically because I use a 20 gauge Blumenthal style anterior chamber maintainer, and that fits that very snugly. I do a tangential incision nasally. I'm operating temporally. I have two side ports to use as manipulating ports. The next step that I'll do is, in this case, place the Blumenthal anterior chamber maintainer. I've actually switched a little bit. I'm now putting the blue in first. That gives it a little bit more time to stain. The Blumenthal goes in. There's a technique to tuck it underneath the speculum, tape it out of the way so it doesn't rotate or come out of the eye during the surgery. You can see that maintainer has serrations and is very well secure in that incision. Obviously, we'll need to stain the capsule, so trypan blue will be coming in next, and allow that some time to stain that mature white cataract. It does have some what looks like some brown nuclear sclerotic cataract underneath the white part. So we have a little bit of stain in there, and then I will aspirate that out once I feel like it's been in there an adequate amount of time for me to visualize the capsule for the capsulorhexis. And this will be a continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis utilizing inexpensive 25 gauge cystotone through the two side port incisions. Certainly if you had micro capsulotomy forceps, that could also be used, but this is a very inexpensive way to do this procedure. Make my initial incision, and I will tear the capsule around. And again, I want it to be a large rhexis because this is a big lens. I need to be able to prolapse it out. Surgeons who are used to doing this step under OVD or viscoelastic will be really concerned. Oh, look how far out you are. It's going to go peripherally. The anterior chamber maintainer keeps that anterior part of the lens flat. It just will not go peripheral. If I can get around all the way with my right hand, I'll do that, but it can be difficult to go underneath the incision port. So I will change to my left hand at times and continue the rhexis underneath the right hand side port. And you can see most of the time I'm staying on top of the capsule and pulling rather than pushing. And there's a different behavior with the anterior chamber maintainer than there is under OVD. But as long as you keep that blanket, if you will, flat, and you're able to keep your needle on top of it, it's a very controlled way to do it. Now I'm going to mechanically rotate this lens. It'll do two things. It'll loosen. These big lenses are actually easy to rotate. It gives me an idea of how big this lens is. It's a big one. And also, I already have it rotating. On occasion of that step, it'll actually prolapse itself up into the anterior chamber. So now we have the baby ready to deliver, but we haven't made the birth canal yet. So we'll open up the conjunctiva, make a generous peritomy. I don't need to be forcing myself in too small of a conjunctival opening. In this procedure, bigger is better. Bigger peritomy, bigger incision. When you're delivering a baby and the birth canal is too small, you end up causing trauma. You have to do episiotomies. We don't want that. Since we have control over the size of the birth canal, let's make it large. Let's make it watertight, which is the bedrock of this surgery. So I do a generous amount of cautery because I want a good visibility. Right now I'm doing a coaptation cautery. You can do it with a pencil cautery. You can do it with Wordsworth ball with an open flame. You can do it with a low temp cautery, but I do like to have the bleeding stop RBCs out of the way so I can visualize my incision. Sometimes this can be one of the most tedious and longest parts of the surgery if somebody is very vascular and very messy. You can see that I cauterize out to the edges because I will make a frown incision, and I want those edges to be clear of blood if I can. Making a frown incision opposite of the limbus will reduce the induction of astigmatism. If we're keratometry and we really know where the steep axis is, we could potentially do a smile or a straight incision to try to reduce astigmatism on axis. That's typically not information that I have in the majority world. And it's a secondary goal. The main goal is let's restore vision, but it's nice to not induce a lot of astigmatism. On average, these 10 millimeter incisions with the frown are induce about a diopter to perhaps a diopter and a half, sometimes 0, sometimes more, but it's not a lot of astigmatism that we make. So my peak of my smile is generally a couple millimeters away from the limbus, and then I'll make it all the way out to the diameter of the cornea. So this is a good 10 millimeter external incision. I like to make the perpendicular incision a little over 50% of the sclera. I want a good solid lip that helps with water tightness and also manipulation. So I might make it 2/3 of the scleral depth, which sometimes is not very much in a thin sclera. But I want to see the sclera opening. I want to see some blue. I don't want to see brown. That would be the choroidal body or ciliary body, the choroid. So now I've got a good perpendicular incision. I'll make a little bit of a lip, a millimeter or two, so I have a nice solid lip. And then I'm going to flatten out and begin to tunnel along the curvature of the sclera. And when I get to the cornea, the curvature changes, and I'll go into clear cornea with a few millimeters. So the end incision will look like a suspension bridge. A curve here, a curve along the cornea, and a couple sides of that. So now in this video, I'm up into clear cornea. I haven't entered the eye. There's no deepening of the chamber. You would see that cortex move around. I want to get the shoulders generous. I want to get that birth canal generous. So I'll make sure I'm all the way out to the edges. And some surgeons will have a different architecture of the opening incision. That's fine. Not right or wrong, but you certainly want to tunnel out to the sides. And then the third step will be to dimple down with a keratome is what I typically use. It doesn't matter the size because I'm going to open it up to probably internally 11 or even 12 millimeters. But I'll use a keratome to find the end of my tunnel, dimple down, and then extend all the way out into the corners. Now when I'm opening, when I'm dimple down, opening the anterior chamber opening, I want to be cutting as I'm going in. So I'm cutting as I'm going in, except for the shoulders. Out there, I'll have to cut when I come out. So right there, I'm cutting when I'm going out. But otherwise, I'm cutting when I'm going in. And now I'm testing. I want to make sure there's not multiple layers. I want to make sure that incision is one layer. It can be difficult when you're delivering. So now I'm ready to rotate the lens out of the bag. This is a rock and roll technique. It rotates and pops up, and this one just wants to come out. So I didn't even stop. I just depressed on the posterior lip of that wound, and it just came out. Generally, I'll move that nucleus into the birth canal, take Kelman-McPherson lens forceps, depress on the posterior lip, and allow it to pop out. So I have some cortex in there. The aspirating handpiece is connected to usually a 5cc syringe. Could be smaller or bigger, but I like a 5cc. And I'm aspirating that manually with my thumb. And there's a double female-ended silicone tubing that Storz made for us specifically for that, so it would connect well to both ends and have a nice solid grip. With the two side ports, easy to change directions to get cortex out 360 degrees. You can go in through the main wound, but it's a little less watertight. Sometimes I have a big epinuclear piece or a big cortical piece, and I'll just loosen it up and not want to aspirate it all out. I'll just burp it out of the main wound. Now we're ready for lens insertion. This is a 3-piece lens, which I find safer than a 1-piece PMMA, but certainly you can do 1-piece PMMA. So I want to get the optic and the leading haptic in so that's the incision is again watertight. That leading haptic is now ready to be pushed into the bag, and then I'll rotate the trailing haptic in. And this one happens to be using a Lester hook, but it could be a Sinskey hook, whatever sort of manipulation device you're comfortable with. So I will now be pressing on the optic looks like, I'm sorry, the leading haptic is already in, so now I'll just be dialing in the trailing haptic into the capsular bag, and it's well centered and looking good. So now I remove the irrigation port. I'll hydrate the side ports. I'll put in, I will close the conjunctiva with coaptation cautery. I'll put in intracameral antibiotic and a subconjunctival antibiotic. So there I'm hydrating the side ports, nice, watertight, no sutures needed. The incision that might be a little bit more stretched out would be the anterior chamber maintainer incision, but it hydrates well. And this is a solid deep chamber, round pupil, lens in the bag, no viscoelastic, no trauma to the endothelium. There are some nuances to closing the conjunctiva. It'll roll up. You want to spread that all the way out so you can get the epithelial surfaces together. A tap of the cautery typically will bring that together. They'll have a little bit of foreign body sensation from that area, but it's one way to reduce resources, not have to suture that. Certainly, you could suture that if needed, but that's generally adequate to cover the incision for a safety standpoint. Now I'll be placing in some intracameral antibiotic, and then belt-end suspenders approach. We'll put in a subconjunctival antibiotic with some short-acting steroid. If you had a depot steroid, that's not wrong. This is, I believe it's cefazolin and dexamethasone. That's the end of the case. Specifically, I use a style Blumenthal anterior chamber maintainer, which fits that incision very snugly.